Hi, everybody. Welcome to Esri's design system, build beautiful, consistent web apps faster. I'm here today with Julio Ochoa, who's the product owner for our design system, and I'm the product manager. And we're pretty excited to talk to you about it today because it's coming out April 22nd, just in a couple of weeks. We're working hard to get that out. And so this session is geared to be an overall look at the resources that are available, and even look at some examples of apps that we built using Calcite and looking into the code to see how we did it. So let's jump right in. So first of all, I think many people know what a design system is because they're becoming more and more popular these days. But there's still many developers that are brand new to design systems. So we like to start out by just talking about what is it and what does it aim to do. So first of all, I think the highest level, you have the design principles. And these are really like the abstract concepts that really help facilitate familiarity and nice user experience. But they are the more abstract ideas that you can apply when you're creating your designs. And then you have the design guidelines, and these are kind of all the best practices at a more detailed level. Information about sound and motion and interaction and voice, tone, typography, how to apply icons and components in a way that makes sense and that basically results in intuitive applications. So that's the design guidelines. And then you have tools and components available. In particular for designers, what's nice is you can get a UI kit, which goes into the common design tools like Figma, Sketch, and Adobe XD. And these are like sticker sheets where they can go in and put together the pieces of the UI to design the application. And then they hand that design over to the development team that can take the UI components that actually come with the design system to build the app, and the icons and the colors, and then they create that application that the designer came up with. So it's kind of the overall idea is that you have this reusable set of resources and guidelines that help you more efficiently create a great experience, and it's consistent because everyone's using the same thing. And so for several years now, Julio's team and our creative lab, in collaboration with other development teams throughout Esri, have worked together to come up with Esri's design system. And their original thought is, hey, let's come up with something that we can all use, so we can really share those resources and have that consistent experience. And so it's been an ongoing project. And you'll start seeing it now that you are kind of more aware of it. You'll start seeing that familiarity between our web applications. You see it used very heavily in the new map viewer. Julio will give you a closer look at that. There's many different places in the map viewer where it's used, but also other Esri web applications. So you see ArcGIS Monitor, you'll see that same component. Sometimes it might look slightly different because it's configured. It's the same component configured slightly differently based on the use case. So it's having a range in Monitor. And then also the new dashboard, just some examples. But throughout Esri, we'll be using it. We're already using it a lot, and we'll be using it more and more over time. So we had this resource, and we thought, this is not just valuable to Esri, like we think that the broader developer community could really benefit from it. And some of those reasons is because these are, established best practices that we've spent a lot of time on, that are native to ArcGIS, that are just part of the overall experience that we wanted to help other developers be able to incorporate into their web applications as well. Of course, we really put a lot of focus on as the aesthetics, keeping it a simple and clean UI, and be able to do all of that in, with high productivity to really be able to do that faster. And I can say I'm fairly new to the design system. I just started last year helping out with the project, and all the demos I'm showing I built, and I was learning how to use it. And it really is a faster experience putting together an app that looks, I think, pretty good. And then, of course, accessibility, localization is really important, and accessibility is becoming so important, and not just for, it's really just for all users. The more accessibility you have in mind, it often results in an overall better experience. So it's a very, very important requirement that many developers have. And accessibility was absolutely taken into account for all the design that the team has worked on. So now looking at Calcite and what it provides, this is just kind of the high level summary of what's there. First of all, it's fully integrated into the developer site. We have that kind of ready to preview to you today. And of course, it'll be released on April 22nd, so you can use it on your own and build your web apps. Right now, we have 47 web components. And this is growing because as the use of our design system spreads and our, the needs of the ArcGIS platform grows, we need to create more components to serve new needs, new workflows. And then now we're offering it to the broader developer community. We'll be getting requirements from all of you as well. So that's definitely a living, breathing set of components and library, including icons as well. So it's definitely an exciting thing. The UI components are built as web components, which is a WC3 standard. So you can simply use them with vanilla JavaScript, HTML, CSS. They're designed to be responsive and, as I mentioned, accessible. And because they're web components, you can use them with any framework. So that's definitely a benefit to that implementation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julio. And he's going to start talking about a little bit more detail about each of the aspects of the design system. So Julio? Julio, we can see your screen, but I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So like Julie mentioned, we have 47 web components, and they are extremely flexible. So they accommodate for different use cases that different applications might have. Like Julie mentioned, we use it quite a lot within Esri, and different products have different use cases. So they're extremely flexible, and it's really easy to apply the flexibility with the components through just properties. Another thing, they're responsive. So if you look on the top right here of the screen, this is like the modal. So when it gets to a specific viewport, the modal then just goes full screen, or you can have it docked. Again, these are all the part of the flexibility from the properties of the components. Like Julie mentioned, they're JavaScript framework agnostic. So if you're building in React or Ember, Angular, or Vue, you can integrate these into your application. Here's just a more detailed view of some of the components, like the alerts, some radio groups, radio buttons, and checkboxes. Another great thing that is included in the documentation is that the components, you can view the components, modify them, and copy their code snippets. I will show a preview of that later on. Out of the box, all of the components come with a light and a dark theme. And it's really easy to either change your entire application in dark theme, which Julie will kind of demo later, or you can just target specific components if you want them to be dark theme. And the library is it's themable. So if you wanted to change the entire, the kind of like the brand color, the spot color of your components, you just need to change one variable, and that'll trickle out through the entire library. Additionally, all of our other colors are exposed to the end user. So those are set as CSS variables. So if you wanted to update the brand color, or maybe some hover colors or background colors or border colors, those are all accessible to the developer. And the font family is something that you can actually just also pass to the component. So by default, since this is a component library and it goes into an environment, an application, all of the components and the text within them, they kind of inherit the font from the application. But you can also adjust that to whatever typeface you need. Right to left and localization is also really important. So if you were to change, say, your language to Arabic, excuse me, the components would kind of understand that and they would flip their orientation. So like icons and arrows, if they're pointing a certain direction, those would also flip. Additionally, we have a string for a property for the components called INTL for internationalization. Because the components themselves, most of them don't do any of the string translation. So we provide a property to be able to inject those strings, if you please. There are some components like the calendar that does have all the localizations and all the strings for localization already embedded within that component. So if we change the language, the localization for the date and the formatting will adjust according to the language that's on the page. Accessibility is another part that we put a lot of focus and emphasis on, from just general focus states and keyboard navigation to color contrast. I mentioned the light and the dark theme. So both our light and our dark theme go through rigorous testing to make sure that the color contrast does pass WCAG AA. So you can see here, there's like our primary brand blue color passing on the white background. So light theme and dark theme pass that for all of our components. And if in the future, as we look at integrating more themes, they would go through the same process as well. Screen reader accessibility is another thing that we put focus on, and we're continuing to improve with all of our components. So icons is also a big portion of our work. So we have user interface icons. So these are more for like actions. And we have over 14 concepts, 1,400 concepts, and they are available in 3 sizes. Even though they are vector graphics, the larger icons typically have more detail than like the smaller ones because there's more pixels to draw in. And they all have tags and categories assigned to them. So if you're going through the filter or our search experience, it's a lot easier to find the icons you're looking for. And I'll show a demo of that as well. Another set that we have is just point symbology. So this is very specific to the map. Same as the Calcite UI icons, you can search for them, you can filter and sort pretty easily to find the icons you're looking for. Okay, so finally we have the UI kit. So this is mainly for designers. So like if you're using Sketch, for example, is a library that we have completed. So the UI kit or the sticker sheet, it's an interface for Sketch for designers to be able to kind of copy and paste and manipulate the components very easily, and they're already all pre-built in our sticker sheet. So we have the Sketch library complete, and we're actually working on the Figma library now, and we also have Adobe XD planned. Okay, so now I'm just gonna show a quick demo. So here we have the Mappier beta. So over 70% of the Mappier beta is built with our Calcite component library, from navigational elements to static buttons to more interactive components like the date picker here. So this is a single date selection date picker. So now going over to ArcGIS Monitor, or I have to sign in, sorry. So usage of our component library really enables consistent interfaces throughout our platform and our products through reusable and flexible components. So here we have the date picker again, but you notice here, like Julie had mentioned earlier, it's a range selection. So you can select the first value and then you can select the second value. To other components like the radio group here, navigational elements and labels, things like that. Okay, now I'll pass it over to Julie to go over some more examples.
All right, so let me share my screen. Okay, so I really wanted to break apart the app, or break down the app to show you exactly how I built this. The demo that I showed in plenary. It's using the ArcGIS API for JavaScript and Calcite. And basically what it allows me to do is search around for vaccine provider locations. And as I hover, I can see like basically this is pop-up information displayed. I can change the search distance that I'm interested in, and then I basically see all the results here. The information I see here is also coming from the pop-up. So let me show you how this is all put together. And hopefully everyone can see my screen with this size font. So this is just the basic HTML that is putting together the app. You can see here that I'm using the light theme. The panels are what the shells here, and the panel is what helps manage the UI layout. This particular section is for the little search criteria section with the slider and the radio group. You can see I'm allowing people to pick from miles and kilometers. So it's really basic HTML, shouldn't look different from what you've seen before. A couple of things I wanted to call out is the results list. This is essentially the place where I'm going to be putting all the results. So I'm using a Calcite accordion and dynamically encode as I find results. I'm going to actually add it to the accordion list. And then I've got things like, a place for the map to be here. So it's pretty straightforward. So in the JavaScript code, there's a couple different things I'm doing. So first of all, I'm just loading a web map. And here, this is probably the important part. After someone searches for an address, I basically get the result. And then using that result, I do a query around that location. The distance is set by the slider, and then I'm only interested in locations where there's vaccines available. Something that's important to notice is that I'm doing it on the layer view. So this is basically doing everything client side, and that's what allows me to have that really speedy performance as I'm changing the search criteria or interacting with the map. So I'm working with everything that's already available on the client. So then I get the results from that query around my location. And what's nice is in the last year or two, I think it's 2 years, we added the ability to get the envelope, the geometry that is surrounding the results. So that's nice because then you could just zoom to them. So basically I get all the results and then I change the map view to zoom to all the results that I got. And then the view changes. So then here I'm creating a feature filter. So this is basically defining like, I want to change the symbol, the way that the vaccine locations look. So I want to gray out and set an opacity on any locations that don't meet my criteria. So basically anything that's outside of that ring of search criteria. And also if they don't have any vaccines available, I want to display them that way, display them with gray and opacity. So it really kind of puts emphasis on the features that do have vaccines still available. So then I go ahead and I take all the results that I got, and here's where I'm actually creating the accordion items. So here for each result, I'm going ahead and create a new accordion item. I'm setting the item title and the subtitle based on the name that's in the attribute. The subtitles based on the number of vaccines that are available. So this is all just coming from the attribute results. And then here, this is kind of showing some of the integration with the JavaScript API together with Calcite. So inside each accordion, I'm putting a feature widget, and I wanted to show you really quick what that is. So here, this is a JavaScript API sample, and this is something that a lot of people find really handy, is that I can, instead of displaying a pop-up right over the feature like this, it takes that formatted content that's normally displayed in a pop-up and instead puts it wherever I want, in any node I want. So I can display it, as I hover. I could put it in a sidebar. And in my case, let's see if I go back to my app. Oops. I'm not so good with the full screen. In my case, I want to display it inside the accordion. And it's also displayed on hover. So that's just kind of a nice integration point with the JavaScript API. So going back to the code, I'm just listening for when it's selected and then I highlight it. So that's pretty much how the app's put together. Now, something that I might want to consider is, since I'm displaying, vaccine information, I might want to say, hey, everybody, this is just a demo. Don't actually go to these places and try and get your vaccine, because I built this to show off Calcite. So to add a modal, basically it's really simple. I add a Calcite modal. I can put in the an icon and then the text I want, and then it'll look nice because it all just matches. So if I go ahead and refresh, I should then get the modal. If I did not save that, maybe I didn't save it. And then go back. So there I get the modal. And this is some of the feedback we got from our professional services, is that even when they were they're using our design system as well, and they would get requirements at the last minute to finish their project. And one of them was to add a modal, and it makes it easier, even if you have a short amount of time, to actually make it look good and consistent with the rest of the application. So that's the modal. So then say I wanted to do the same thing with the dark theme. Well, it still looks good. Everything just kind of coordinates with the dark theme. So I can search for Houston again, and you see that the results all match. So something you might notice as well, this is, as I said, this is a JavaScript widget. This is the feature widget. You see the zoom controls. And it's also using the dark theme. So if we look at that code for the dark version, first of all, by setting the theme to dark on the body, that is what basically controls everything using Calcite. It's just going to use the dark theme, and all the colors will apply and look good with dark. On the API side, the API also has themes, and the API was built based on Calcite design. So if I use the dark theme for the API, then my widgets and everything will coordinate really well with the Calcite dark theme. So it's just kind of a added bonus that they both have that. So something that I like to point out is that with the ability to style your vector base map, I feel like it's another opportunity to brand your app in another way. Like, you could coordinate your base maps in a way that matches your overall brand or your overall UI. So, that's like another cool way to kind of put your own personal touch on an application. So if I instead use this other web map, and I'm just loading a different web map, with a different look with the base map, it really has a different look to it. And, really the possibilities are endless in terms of, the kinds of maps you can create that really becomes part of the overall branding of your application. To switch it out between web maps, all I had to do was copy the web map ID. And then, as you guys saw, I just used that one instead of that one. And then boom, my app uses that map, and it all ties in. I don't have to use web maps. You can use services directly. Web maps just the easiest way to get the job done. Okay, so then I wanted to show you another example. There's that blue example. So I also showed this one in plenary, and there's several things that are custom here. And this is certainly not the extent of what you can customize. But first of all, it actually looks like I got rid of something I had before. You can actually round the button. You can round the button shape for the controls. You can change the branding colors. I showed the CSS variables in plenary. You can apply your own custom font. So the bakery finder header has a different font than the font used throughout the application. And if you don't set the font by default, it just uses the font that's loaded in your app. So if you're using the JavaScript API, it'll use the Avenir font. But I can override that and I can set specific fonts that I want to use. And fonts really do contribute to the branding feel as well. So having a look at how that part worked, my bakery finder, just looking at the CSS, here is where I'm setting those two branding colors, but Julio will show you later in the documentation, there's actually, there's full doc on all the different variables you can set to create your own theme. In the session we're having on Thursday, they'll go even deeper into all the theming possibilities, especially for designers that you can do and really flavor your application via colors. And as well as fonts. So here I'm just setting a different font for the body as I am for the actual header component and the color. So it does make it pretty simple to use your own kind of style and design and really integrate your own branding feel to an application that's consistent and can seamlessly integrate with ArcGIS ecosystem. So I wanted to show one other example, and what I did, and frankly, as I said, I was learning how to use Calcite this last year, and one way to do that is basically to take the JavaScript API samples, and this sample was one of the earliest samples that we created with a JavaScript API. And I took it and then I played around with how I could do the same thing in Calcite. So just taking a very simple example of that, this is using Calcite instead. You can see I just get that hover without actually setting, doing any work to get that to work. And to look at, I wanted to kind of compare the code between those two applications. So this is the sample code. And then this is the version, this is the version that uses Calcite. So if we kind of look at them side by side, the biggest thing that I want to point out between the two is that this is all of the styling that I have, that this is all the styling that needs to happen to get what you saw. And this is generally just kind of spacing and placement type styling. If you look at the sample, look at the comparison with how much styling work you have to do. I mean, it's a lot. And it can be a pain to work through all of this. So when we say that it's easier, it's faster to create a nice looking app, that's because you're using minimum styling to achieve a nice looking app. It's kind of just a lot of it's taken care of. And then when you use it between multiple apps, you have that consistency because it's using the same thing. So one of the other benefits, as I mentioned before, is, well, hey, what if I just want to have a dark theme instead? So if I do that and I go back to my app and then reload it, you'll see that it just uses the dark theme. Now, pay attention here that I didn't change the API, so you do still see the APIs using the light theme. But there's other things you can do, like say I want to add a button to the bottom, and rather than this, what this sample does is lets you drag the item over to the map. So rather than doing that, I can instead have a button that loads it as another option, and then I can make the cards selectable and like actually display that on the card. So if I go back to the code that's generating each card, so if I set that to true, this is the code that it's actually looking through all the portal items and it's creating a card for every portal item it finds. So now if I go back here and I reload it, now I have that button that just looks good. I can select it and do things like that. And it's just, it's kind of an application that, I can iteratively create and, really still maintain it looking pretty good. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Julio to talk a little bit more about the design consistency. So Julio, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. All right. So one of the things that I quickly wanted to share is this is the app that Julie showed with the Texas Vaccine Finder. And I have it open in Sketch. So this is like a design tool for designers literally building the application together. I mentioned the sticker sheet. So I have the application kind of already put together here, but it's missing like a button down here for clearing the search criteria. So I can actually just go to like insert. I can go to my components. I can choose between light theme and dark theme. I'm going to insert a button, a medium button, solid blue, idle. I can just drop it in here. I can adjust it, and then I can also have it say clear filter. Oh, I needed to adjust it after. So this is the environment that designers can kind of interact with, so that they can quickly prototype an application by just dragging and dropping the components and being able to put a mock-up together in a visual design to kind of make that design to development process handoff a lot easier and understandable. And one of the things, and the session for Thursday, they'll go into this more, but you can see like this heading here, it says font size --1. So that's the exact same variable that's used in the implementation part. So everything design matches what is in development, from the actual like render and display of the components to the actual variables and nomenclature that we're using from design to development. Okay, so, and I wanted to jump and go over our documentation site. So this is on developers.arcgis.com. This is a local build that I have running of our documentation site. Again, like Julie mentioned earlier, and at plenary, this will be available on April 22nd. So I want to kind of explore this with you a little bit more, so you get an idea of like the different the tools and the different displays of information and assets you have access to. So I just wanted to jump in here to component and talk a little more detail. So this is a notice. We have a general overview of the component, and we point out to other things like the state colors, which I'll show you a little bit later, and then other kind of similar components like a modal or the alert that can do a similar behavior for kind of more of displaying of messaging. So here's the notice here, the actual render, and I can actually change the color here to red, to yellow for warning. I can add icons if I want here. So like the light bulb, similar to the one that Julie used in the modal. And all this is here in the code snippets. You see there's the icon light bulb. And I can change the scale. And as that happens, you can see that kind of just in real time update here. To use the large one, you see this here as well. And I can just copy that to my clipboard and I can paste it. You can also just just go straight to the GitHub repo where the actual source code is. So you can actually see all the JavaScript there and the CSS that we used to put together. You can also open it just like as a code pen in its own instance to just view that isolated from everything else. Other things you can do is you can view it in dark theme, what it would look like if you do RTL, the flipping of the icons and things like that. And you can just reset everything back to your standard where you kind of started. Other documentation that's really important, more for like kind of behavior and kind of enhancing the user experience outside of the component work. We have things like usage, when you should use the notice, for example, versus using, say, an alert or a modal. Best practices, like things to do, things to avoid. Accessibility, so this is for keyboard navigation. So any component that you go to, you'll see what the keys are from a keyboard, and then what's the function that actually happens when you're interacting with that component just with the keyboard. 2 more guidelines for writing and copy, and then the implementation guidelines. So here you see the properties for the components, and the attributes you can set. So like for color, you can do blue, green, red, yellow. Do you want it to be dismissible? So that's a Boolean and things like that. 2 actual events that of the component and methods that are involved. And then slots. So slots are portions of the component where you can inject or place whatever content you want. So the notice title, the notice message, and you can even like add a link. Like if you want an action to be performed, for example, the notice can be, your credits are running out or running low, and the link can be reloading credits. So just quickly jumping over to another component here, the icon component. So the library has an icon component we just wanted to use by itself. Excuse me. And again, there's like I mentioned, in the Calcite UI icon library, there's 3 different sizes. So if I go here, I can go to like the check mark, and I can change the size. And then the text label, you can do check. And that's important for accessibility. So the text label property is also the area label. So for screen readers, it's able to read out that icon. So talking about icons, we have a full set icon search page here. So on the left, you have some filtering controls. You have your main icon display content in the middle. And then on the right, you have like your preview. So if I wanted to search for the check again, there's the check down here under symbols, and along with other checks, check marks, or I can actually type selected. And you see that there's other items that fall under that category. So you don't have to specifically search for check. And clicking that will display the 3. It'll tell you what category is in and what version it was added, 1.5. The other tags, so symbols, marks, selected. And then here you have the code snippet for the actual component usage. Other things you can do, let me clear my search here. You can actually just go through categories. Like I want to see only directions and files. Then you get that here, and you can see that they're categorized, directions, files, and you can kind of just see them all together or ungroup them. To other kind of cool things of like changing the scale within here and then changing the display as well. You want to see in dark theme, you can kind of quickly change the colors as well. There's a lot of customization for viewing grid lists. It's very flexible for you to find what you're looking for and even visualize it in a way that is more fitting to your use case. Okay, so moving on quickly, I wanted to go into some of our foundations, like Julie mentioned, for colors. So this is for colors and themes. Here we kind of go over like what are our primary colors and our primary variables that we use for our design system. So the main kind of spot brand color is our blue, and that could be changed to something else. To backgrounds, to text colors that we have, and foreground colors, and state colors. So like the notice, the alerts, they follow these same guidelines for color throughout our entire library. For use cases, like when do you use the information color, or success, or critical, or danger, to having like the full light and dark theme. So these are like all the variables that make up our light and dark theme. And again, these are set as CSS variables, so they can be overwritten. And then we have general best practices of how to use color. Like to use color to put emphasis on actions, like, primary call to actions, and avoid using it as like full backgrounds, because it's like the blue would be very strong, and same with like the UI states. And then we link out to our full color repository where we have like the entire Esri color palette. Other thing that I quickly wanted to touch on was typography here. So again, here we again go into the color variables, font weights and sizing. So this is our font scale, and you can kind of preview it on the right. And you can change the weight as well. You want it light or medium or bold. You can also have different line heights, which are kind of hard to see in some of the fonts. So you can see it here, how it kind of shifts. So if text wraps, we use a kind of higher line height so that it's easier and more legible. To kind of type pairings, like what types should you have together, from like a heading to a subheading to body copy and tertiary text. And again, best practices, all the pages from the foundations to the actual components have best practices for kind of recommendations of things that you should try to do and things you should avoid. The other thing quickly here is we have components with different JavaScript frameworks. So this documentation and guidelines here give you an overview of the integration into, like I mentioned, Angular, React, Preact, Vue, and they have kind of step-by-step guidelines of how to get these up and running in your app. And this is just more like smooth integration, because they're web components, so it's pure JavaScript. So you can just say if you wanted to include it via your CDN, you put the JavaScript file and the CSS file, and you can start already using the components like Julie was showing, where you can kind of copy and paste the HTML. Yeah, so that's kind of a high-level overview of our documentation site and some of the things that you can expect to see on April 22nd.
Julio, should I go ahead and show a few examples?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So, so we, as I mentioned, you guys are seeing my screen. As I mentioned, we are, we're not only using this for Esri products and websites, but it's heavily used in our professional services group. So this is a example app that they built for humanitarian topographic atlas. Let's see if I can advance the slide. It's a really simple app, but it's actually, this is an example of an app where, they could use Calcite right from the beginning. So they were able to quickly move through the design process with the customer, create a design that they liked, and then, the UI, the building of the UI was actually something they could do very quickly. And then the other thing to point out is that, the demos you saw in plenary today, it wasn't just my demo that used Calcite. You can see throughout the demos in plenary that they're actually using Calcite as well. Like I see the radio button group, I see switches, and other examples here, another switch there. So it's actually something that we're starting to use more and more, throughout our apps, just because it is, that easy to create nice looking apps that integrate well with the rest of our technology. And then here's another example you'll see. So throughout sessions as well, this is one of Jan's demos he's doing in his Photoshop-like effects session. So just wanted to point that out. And then we have business partners that are early adopters that are using Calcite. So this is GeoJob, and what I thought was pretty cool about their stuff is, when I look through the various parts of their applications, this is clean my org, and then this is backup my org. You can really see that consistency between their own applications, not just with ArcGIS. So you can really establish that consistency between your own apps, which is a definite benefit, and then that seamless integration with ArcGIS. So really our goal is to help help developers really create that nice user-friendly experience, keep it consistent between apps, make it as easy as possible, and if it has some integration with ArcGIS, it'll have that familiar experience that we spend a lot of time and effort really cleaning up the overall experience. Whole teams dedicated to this that you guys can just use in your applications. So I think we covered this part already. With that, I believe we can turn it over to some questions.
Yes, Julie, thank you. It's Ewan here. I'm going to moderate the questions that have come in. There's been quite a few as you've been talking, so we'll get straight to it. Hopefully we can get through as many as we can in 15 minutes. So I'll just take them from the top. So maybe Julio, here's one for you. Is Calcite a design system or a framework? And what's the difference between the two?
I would say it's a design system. So a framework, I kind of see really like our component library and the way we built that and the way it's consumed as kind of that framework. But there's a lot more documentation and information for making those probably even technical decisions, but design decisions to really enhance that user experience. And along with other assets, right, that you can just kind of download, like the Sketch UI kit. So there's all these moving pieces to the design system that are all synchronized, all consistently moving together to accommodate from different aspects of the development process, from design to the actual development. So I would say Calcite is definitely a design system.
All right, thank you. Julie, here's one for you. Is this an alternative to Web App Builder or Experience Builder? What's the relationship there?
So I get this question really frequently when I present Calcite, and I see other questions related to Experience Builder. And essentially, developers that are looking to build on top of an application framework and have a builder environment, that's really a web app builder, and hopefully you're going to be using Experience Builder, solution. Calcite's really something that's providing the foundational building blocks like buttons and accordions and layout and things where you're creating a purely custom application. And we're seeing, there's quite a bit of a need for both scenarios. In terms of integration with Experience Builder, and I think this answers another question coming up, is right currently there is not like a Calcite theme that you can use in Experience Builder. But I've been meeting with their development team, and our plan is to eventually offer a Calcite theme. So you could basically choose not only Calcite, but that's one of the options to create an app that looks like Calcite, and you can actually generate your own app with that style. Developers that want to add their own Calcite components to widgets, they can do that, and basically that widget would just be applying to that single application and not in the builder environment, because there is different theming going on. Our long-term plan is to have better integration with Experience Builder so that you can create custom themes and widgets that can be fully used within the Experience Builder environment. And that's something that we're researching, but it's not currently scheduled for a release.
All right, that was good, pretty comprehensive. And yes, you did answer another question there, so we'll click that one as done. What about this one? Does this replace the Bootstrap Calcite map theme?
So I believe that the Bootstrap Calcite map theme was a lot like a template. It wasn't truly part of our design system. There's other apps that do replace the Calcite, the Bootstrap Calcite application. So that one is deprecated and being replaced with other apps, and it really is different from the real design system.
Okay, thank you, Julie. I think here's another one for you, Julie, maybe. Will this version of Calcite support the Sassy styling tool that was previously in Gianfranco's GitHub repo?
So that tool is specifically to use with ArcGIS API for JavaScript widgets. So if you want to create your own, CSS theme for widgets, you'd be using that, and it's separate from Calcite. So they're unrelated.
All right. Here's another one here. WCAG compliance is so critical in Ontario, Canada, based on the provincial AODA legislation. So many of the Esri products are still deficient in meeting WCAG, so we keep having to invest in baking it into our products. How will this impact that?
So, and I think I'd like Julio to add on to my answer. But I know that we do get feedback, especially from Canada, about this throughout our product stack for in many areas. We are actively working on it, improving the support. We do ask if there's like specific things that need to be improved to make a case with support. It's the best way to track it. So yeah, we just need to attack it by a case-by-case basis. And Julio, I don't know if you have anything to add specific to Calcite to that.
Yeah, so we do take accessibility really seriously, and like we make decisions based off of that sometimes, even when it goes over aesthetics. We always try to have a balance, but we know how important accessibility is. And actually, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be going through a full audit for every single component individually, to make sure that for like the color contrast, like I've already mentioned, and screen reader support and keyboard navigation, to make sure that we really have a really robust solution for accessibility. So definitely at the top of our list.
Okay, thanks, guys. Well, what about, can you add a custom widget using this framework?
So this particular question is interesting because I'm not 100% sure if they're thinking about like an API widget or something specific to Calcite. We just to make note of, there are 2 sessions dedicated to creating API widgets. One is creating your own widget, one's customizing, and they just so happen to use Calcite for the customizing one. So you kind of see how they create an API widget that has a Calcite presentation. That being said, if you are not interested in the JavaScript API and you really are only talking about Calcite, there is a contribution guide that talks about how you can create a web component, or basically something that integrates with Calcite. And I don't know if, Julio, if you want to add anything to that in terms of specifics, but we'll be adding that to the developer documentation, or we'll be in GitHub.
Yeah. So that's stuff that, yeah, definitely will be added to our documentation. So look out for that when we release. And I think that might, yeah, I thought I saw a question about, is this already in production, already out in production? So.
Great.
Yeah, I saw that somewhere too. That's April 22nd is when we'll be putting it to production.
Thanks, guys. What about the Julio? You showed the great documentation that was on a local build that will be coming to the developer's website. How does that documentation on the developer's website relate to the Esri GitHub IO Calcite web documentation?
Yeah, so before, as we were working on this a lot internally, we didn't have a single location to get all this information. So we have IO pages for a lot of our repos, like for our colors, for our foundations, like spacing, for our icon library. So in short, what's going to happen after release, all of those other kind of individual standalone pages for different topics of our design system are going to be deprecated. And they're going to point, everything's going to point to developers through ArcGIS. So that's going to be the centralized hub location for everything Calcite.
All right, that's nice and clear. Can you add custom widget using, oh, I think you answered that, Julie. Is this demo application public? I think this was specifically the vaccine finder, I think, Julie, that you were demoing the question when you were showing it.
I plan to show it share it by the end of the conference. It's okay. Not that.
So you'll make it available on GitHub?
Yes, I'll make it available on GitHub.
Great. I get this helps me build apps that look like Esri apps, but will it help me build my apps for my brand's look and feel?
I think that's definitely the fine line, you know, that we're walking, that we definitely want to give developers the ability to put their own design and branding into apps, like the color scheme, the fonts, as I've mentioned, you know, integrating your logos. And I even showed, you know, ideas for map. In terms of like the how deep of customization that you can do, you know, we really kind of try and, you know, put the flexibility in there to configure the components for different use cases, but then keep some level of consistency so that you can have, you know, the consistency between your apps and then, you know, integration scenarios. That being said, the code is also available. So if you have a need to go, you know, a lot deeper into the customization, you do have access to the code where you can do, you know, more customization. I don't know, Julio, would you like to add anything to that one?
Yeah, no, I think you said it well, Julie, and that's something that we're continuing to kind of observe as there's more usage of the design system, like what other level of flexibility can we offer while keeping the system intact. And I think that's the point that's really important that Julie brought up, is that we still want the entire system to be kind of like one cohesive experience from a user story, from a design story perspective. So again, we're just getting this out, and we'll be collecting feedback, and that'll be really helpful moving forward to see, you know, what more level of customization or theming can happen down the line.
Okay, thanks, guys. It's another one on accessibility. It's great to see the accessibility considerations, but they seem to be limited to the widgets. Are there any accessibility enhancements to the data displays, maps, tabular displays, charts, etc.?
Yeah, I think this really speaks more to the JavaScript API, the way that I'm reading it. And we definitely spent a lot of time in accessibility. In fact, in the last year, it mentions tabular display. We added a lot of accessibility enhancements to the feature table. And what I would recommend is there's a recording from last user conference actually at pretty much every conference we have the last year, we have a session just dedicated to accessibility. So that would be a good way to kind of review what we have available now, and then some of the work that's going on moving forward. And we have one planned for this user conference as well. So you can get access to those on YouTube.
Great, thanks, Julie. I think I know the answer to this question is, are Esri JavaScript API widgets using Calcite?
So this is, and I think I'll answer this together with Julio. So the JavaScript API widgets were designed using the Calcite design. Now they actually, the internals of the widgets themselves don't use the Calcite components yet, like the actual web components, but we have an ongoing project to move in that direction. So it's actually active work going on to start moving over to be using the components. Julio's team did a full audit throughout the API to see, where we want to, increase it and improve it. So this is definitely something that's very high priority for us.
Yeah, and the thing is with Calcite is as we're rolling it out to everybody outside of Esri, it's also being rolled out internally within Esri. So as Julie said, there's lots of teams now starting to build and use Calcite, so that all of the different technologies that will be coming out from Esri will share the same common design, and it's just a work in progress. When will it be coming out when will it be in production? When can people start using it to build their apps with?
On April 22nd.
All right, April 22nd, circle that date. This was, again, during one of your demos, Julie, that there was a question that came in. So is Bootstrap no longer necessary?
With Calcite, you do have the ability to have the UI layout, and you don't necessarily need Bootstrap. You're not, you can use it if you want, but it's definitely not necessary.
Right. Okay, here's another one. Will this integrate directly into Drupal, or are we still just going to launch as a hosted app?
So for this question, I wasn't 100% sure what was meant by launching as a hosted app. Actually in a previous plenary some years ago, I demonstrated integration with Drupal, but it did require custom development. And I know, like, the city of Raleigh also has a full Drupal implementation using the JavaScript API. So no, I don't expect you to have to launch as a separate app.
Okay, a question about Figma. When will the support for Figma UI kit be released?
Yeah, so that's actually a work in progress right now. We're actually making really good traction. So I would say at the latest end of Q2, if not sooner.
Okay. Julio, during one of the demos, you brought up ArcGIS Monitor. I think you were showing it as an example of an application built with Calcite. And there was a question, you can maybe clarify, does one need ArcGIS Monitor in order to use Calcite?
No, you don't need it to use Calcite. So our getting started page is really helpful, and it's really fast. Really, if you wanted to get started very quickly, you can actually just grab the JavaScript file and the CSS file straight from the CDN, and you can already start using it. You can start going into our documentation, browsing the components, copying those code snippets, and pasting them into your app, and they'll start to populate.
Great. What about using other frameworks like React and Angular?
Yeah, so those are supported now. We're still working on more integration, like deeper integration into React, because I know on the technical side, some of the items with React's component life cycles are a bit different. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work now, but we're trying to make that process a lot better integration with output targets for React.
Okay, great. Here's another question here. Does Calcite have more UI components than Experience Builder? How do you translate the Calcite UI components to Experience Builder UI components? I guess they're trying to decide which technology they might use to build an application.
Yeah, so it's really, it's based on your need. Do you want to start with an application framework that's configurable and maybe you just build a custom widget to add in? Or are you creating an application from scratch? It's at the very high level, that's really what you're thinking about. If you really want to kind of map the two, the Calcite UI, the components could be like a button that you might have inside of a widget that's within Experience Builder. It's not at the same app. It's not the same app level implementation. If you know what I mean. They're really kind of the building blocks that you create widgets and experiences within, a bigger application.
Okay. Well, actually, we've come to the end of our Q&A session. There's a few more questions that we've not been able to get to, but I think what Julie and Julio will do, we'll take these questions and move them over to Ask the Expert forum, and then we can answer the questions in text so that everybody will get a question answered. But with that, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you've had a good chance to get an idea of what the Calcite design system is all about and how you might start using it in your apps. Julie and Julio, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.